Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're going to go back in time a little bit today to a time just before I started collecting comics with New Mutants number 86. This is part of the Acts of Vengeance storyline. More importantly, this is the first regular series work by Mr. Bobbert E. Liefeld. So, just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, what you can do is, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. And if you subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do, including the Blood Force stuff and the YouTube videos before they get released to YouTube. There's also some Patreon exclusive content. So, New Mutants, of course, was an X-Men spin-off, written originally by Chris Claremont, concurrently with Uncanny, which allowed them to build up the characters a little bit in Uncanny and have the storylines play out more in their own series for some nice continuity of development. It did turn into a bit of a weirder series, but I think that might be a little bit inevitable when one of your earliest runs of artists is a reasonably lengthy run by Bill Sienkiewicz. Some of those early New Mutants issues look fucking wild. And eventually, the book got handed over to Louise Simonson, and just prior to this, I think the longest standing artist was probably Brett Blevins. And from what I understand, the book did have a following. There were some people who were all in on New Mutants, but it's the usual problem. Yeah, we had some guys who love this book. We just need more of them. And the numbers were dropping for New Mutants. And then along comes Rob Liefeld, and you've got this guy who every time you put him on a book, the numbers go up. You know, he's a young kid, and he needs to be, put up somewhere where he can be trained to, increase his artistic ability, increase his ability to tell a story, to produce pages on time, all that kind of stuff. So you put him on a failing book with a bunch of veteran creators. And that's, I think, what they did with this one. I mean, Louise Simonson had been in the game for a long time. He's going to be inked by Bob Wiacek. And honestly, I think Bob Wiacek probably brings out the best in Rob Liefeld, at least in some respects. The thing they didn't anticipate, of course, was that Rob Liefeld became insanely popular somehow, and gained a commensurate amount of power within the company because of that, and was able to get Louise Simonson kicked off the book, started inking himself, brought in his own script writer, brought in his buddies, Merritt Michaels, and I don't know if he knew Brian Murray beforehand. It doesn't seem to match up, but I could be wrong. And, sales go through the roof, the stories go downhill in a fucking hurry, but who cares? Cha-ching. And that's how we get X-Force. So, this issue here, of course, is the start of the Rob Liefeld New Mutants era. And as I said, this was during Acts of Vengeance. If you're unfamiliar with Acts of Vengeance, yeah, me too. From what I've read, it was one of those crossovers that were just piling up in the wake of Secret Wars. That was one of the big drawbacks of Secret Wars, was that all of a sudden you had to have crossovers that went across the entire fucking publisher. So you get Acts of Vengeance, you get Follow the Mutants, you get shit like Atlantis Attacks and the Evolutionary War going through the annuals. All these events where you might theoretically have to buy like 30 or 40 copies to get, in quotes, the whole story. Not that there's really a complete story to get there. It was more little pockets for the most part, and then the core books. And the storyline for Acts of Vengeance was, again, from what I've read, Loki's trying to fuck with Thor, as per usual, and they come across a new idea, because they're all like, oh man, my guys always beat me. Yeah, my guys always beat me too. I could beat your guy, I could beat your guy too. So why don't we have the heroes fighting against villains they're not used to fighting? So that's how you got stuff like the X-Men versus the Mandarin, or the Avengers versus Magneto, or the New Mutants versus the Vulture, apparently. I think this was an instance of a bottom-tier book having to feature a bottom-tier villain, where it's like, okay, who do we have left? The Vulture? Sure. Why not? It doesn't really make for, there's no element where it's like, oh man, he can do stuff that their normal foes can't, but it's weird seeing the Vulture in a New Mutants book, so why not? So let's start with the cover here. I always thought this was one of Rob's better covers. I'm like, man, I don't ever hear anybody talking about this particular cover. Actually, I've heard people saying how this was bad with, how is he grabbing that ankle? That ankle must be like a straw. But no, apparently the reason it's better than usual is because it's copied. Right out the gate, Rob Liefeld is going to swipe the cover composition from like the splash page from the first appearance of the Vulture. And I don't think this was an attempted steal. I don't think Rob Liefeld does attempts to steal very often, to be honest. I think he assumes everything's okay. We're all in this together kind of thing. And doesn't take into account that, people are going to take this shit personally. And he would do this with some of the later New Mutants cover compositions as well. The very next issue, the first appearance of Cable, is also a cover swipe. And while at least Todd, remember to put after Ditko on this, because this is a Todd McFarlane inked cover, I don't think there's an after anybody on the cover of New Mutants 87, or any of the ones that follow. And while I said earlier that Bob Wiacek brings out the best in Rob Liefeld, that's with a caveat. The Todd McFarlane inked Rob Liefeld covers are the best Liefeld stuff, period. But, I mean, that was never going to be a regular thing. Todd's too big and important to have him just inking this kid regularly. We got like 3 or 4 Todd ink covers out of him, though, so that's nice. But yeah, good cover, good pose on the Vulture. I don't think I've ever seen Rob draw a pose that dynamic and, like, just consistently good and well-proportioned. Rusty here, not so much. That's pretty awkward. Maybe partially because his torso is on sideways. He's kind of turned like an action figure. And he really does copy every aspect of the cover, down to little parts of the buildings here. Everything in the building is the same. So yeah, he just swiped the whole thing. Rusty's a character I'm not actually very familiar with, because I didn't read any New Mutants back when it was coming out. So most of the stuff I would read, the regular guys I knew were guys like Richter and Boom Boom and Rain and Cannonball. And then Rusty and Skids, who feature prominently in this issue, I wasn't familiar with at all, really. And I think the reason they're in this issue is because the regular New Mutants are actually off in Asgard at the moment. So we're going to kick things off here with the Vulture coming to kill his old friend the Tinkerer, because he got a message that the Tinkerer had reproduced the design for his wings and was going to be giving them out to other superheroes. And Vulture is very jealous of his wings design. And just looking at the credits here, yep, we got Louise Simonson, Bob, of course, Bob Wiacek, and probably a big part of the problem for why Rob Liefeld was able to take over the book, Bob Harris. So the Tinkerer is ready for the Vulture and shoots some electrified bolas at him to ensnare him. And they kind of come to a quick standoff where the Tinkerer is able to explain that somebody sent him plans for the Vulture's wings and and paid him in advance to build them, and then also sent a message off to the Vulture to advise him of this. So somebody was trying to get these two together, which sounds like a Loki kind of thing. And again, we don't have the Steve Ditko composition or the Todd McFarlane inks, so the Vulture's going to look a little bit different than he did on the cover here. Liefeld's going to have to do what he can on everything. But thankfully, he's got Bob Wiacek kind of shoring him up. So this stuff doesn't look fantastic. Like all these backgrounds, again, in quotes, where it's just screen door, screen door, screen door everywhere. Liefeld doesn't want to draw anything that isn't people, basically. I'll try to take it a little easy on him in this, because this is his first regular work, right? He's still a very young kid. But I mean, some of his stuff tends to be pretty egregious. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. And I did have to mangle this copy a little bit. There's a weird thing where these two pages were together, where there was like a seal between them. Like they were part of the same sheet, which doesn't make any sense to me. So I had to exact them apart and wasn't quite able to pull it off without damage. What can you do? Had to see those pages. So we've got Rusty and Skids here, who are against the police because they're escaping from jail. They've been captured by Freedom Force and kind of framed as being dangerous mutants. So Rusty's power is that he's pyrokinetic. Skids creates force fields that are frictionless. It's always interesting when you can get super specific like that. If you can come up with ways to make it an interesting gimmick, which I imagine they were probably able to from time to time. I mean, Louise Simonson knows what she's doing. And we're not going to see very much in the way of typically Liefeld pages here. I don't think there's any splashes throughout the entire book. Rusty and Skids run over to commandeer a truck. Not a terrible looking truck. A little small maybe, but otherwise decent. And I wonder if that was a mostly Wyachek thing. I mean, Liefeld had a tendency at this time where, again, he would just assume things, because that seems to be Liefeld's game. He always just assumes that everything is allowed. So he would assume that, colorists and inkers would make his backgrounds for him. On Hawk and Dove, which I may touch on eventually, he was submitting artwork with no hands and feet, because he assumed the inker would do it for him. So yeah, like I said, they commandeer the truck here. We're going to get very similar shots of Skids here that we had earlier. So I think at this point, Liefeld really only knows how to draw a woman's face from that angle, maybe. And it is a good woman's face, at least. I think a large part of that is Wyachek, though. So yeah, they're busting out of the prison facility, so they're going to run down the gate here. And Rusty apparently is the character that was featured in Deadpool 2, the pyrokinetic kid there, which I didn't realize that was a connection. So when he calls himself Fire Fist, that's from the comics. Didn't know. So the Vulture's going to fly the Tinkerer over to the courthouse, carrying him with his arms, which I can't really blame on Liefeld, because, how the fuck else was he supposed to get him over there? Unless it was, he had, a harness or something. Or, maybe if he had him on his back, that might work, too. But, it does make it look as though the Vulture doesn't need his wings in order to fly. In which case, why the fuck would you have wings? A bit of a rough shot of the Vulture here. This almost looks like it was drawn upside down, the way that mouth is. So the Vulture's plan is to break out some character called Nitro, who I've never heard of before. And Nitro's going to destroy a whole bunch of shit. And basically the reasoning behind this is so that the Vulture can show off his villainy. He does speak explicitly about being a villain and performing acts of villainy. So it's a different time, where that's what supervillains do. They expressly go out to do evil things. Remember when villains were intentionally unsympathetic so that, you wanted to see them get beat? It's almost an alien idea now. And he mentions several times about how the person who's trying to propel him on to do the acts of vengeance shit originally wanted him to fight Speedball. And the Vulture thinks, that's a horseshit superhero. I'm not fighting that guy. He thinks I can't hack it because I'm old. And he says a couple of times in this issue, I'll show him just because I'm bald doesn't mean I can't do some evil shit. And swoops in through the skylight and snatches up Nitro's holding tube. They have to keep Nitro constantly sedated, because otherwise he'll build up like a charge and let it out with explosive force that could potentially destroy a few city blocks. And again, it was lucky they had those handles on the tube there. But again, yeah, the Vulture does not need his wings to fly. Decent shot of him. Decent enough. Meanwhile, this is the courthouse I think that Rusty and Skids are trying to escape from. So they happen to see the Vulture and try to stop him. And they're trying to clear their name. They did fight him previously an issue or two ago. I don't think it was... Oh, it might have... No, I don't think it was 85. I think I had that back in the day. The one with the Garm, the giant dog on the cover? Oh, okay. No, that was issue 82. So yeah, Rusty and Skids did fight the Vulture in issue 85. So yeah, this is very classic comics, kind of comics, where everybody speaks in exclamations, and, the plot is kind of, it moves along, although it's a little simplistic sometimes in its action. But the Vulture and the Tinker are going to let Nitro loose here, while Fire Fist and Skids attempt to run up the ladder and stop him. These are kind of uninteresting pages. I imagine they got pretty specific scripts from Louise Simonson. But, you know, you get no large panels whatsoever. This is the kind of thing Todd was always railing against. So yeah, we get like multiple pages of Rusty and Skids climbing up this ladder so that they can reach the Vulture and the Tinkerer, which really kind of makes them feel like they're not the most adept superheroes. Like, they got to try really hard to do anything even remotely good. And there's some interesting stuff with Skids here where she has to be careful because they're getting shot at by the cops. Because, you know, they've busted out and all that. They've attracted a lot of attention. So Skids has to deploy her force field, but because of how slippery the force field is, she has to be very careful not to move while she's on the ladder, or she might slip off. You know, nice little hang up. It doesn't really lead to much, but it's an interesting little detail. So Rusty gets to the top first and is able to tackle the Vulture right off the side of the building. So, you know, essentially the cover shot. I think this is like the one big kind of action-y panel Rob has gotten this entire issue. It doesn't look too special, does it? That's a shame. Anyway, so Rusty and Skids aren't able to quite get there in time. Nitro busts out of his containment unit and looks like an overgrown toddler. Like I said, I don't know this character at all, but I mean, I can see why I don't know him. He seems to be very forgettable. And again, talks very much like a classic comic book villain. Just vengeance! I will have vengeance on those who trapped me. Soon you will feel the explosive fury of Nitro! So while Rusty is wrestling with the Vulture in midair, and a useful deployment of the vertical no background panel. Actually, this kind of thing usually works pretty well. And Rusty asks him why the fuck he would release that guy. And the Vulture explains his plans. Because, I mean, he's going to blow up the courthouse and everyone in it. And that's what I have in mind. I'll show them all that despite his bald dome, the Vulture is a power to be reckoned with. There will be destruction as the world has seldom seen. And then I'll fly away. So, not exactly a New Mutants specific plan here. Like, this really is kind of like, we have no real ideas, it feels like. And we get a shot of Rusty here that looks very Art Adams. As in, I wonder if there is a panel somewhere that Rob copied that from. It's possible. It's very possible. But Rusty burns the Vulture's feathers in midair so that they can, they're going to fall down and knock themselves out. But that's the price you pay to be a hero. So Nitro is going to immediately start blowing up. It kind of looks like the Vulture has no feathers anymore, like maybe Rusty burned them all off. They don't mention it too much, but I think that might be the case. So he has no way to get away. Nitro powers up. Skids runs toward him. Yeah, a little awkward looking, but okay. And extends her field so that she can completely envelop him so that he won't really destroy anything when he charges up. Yeah, this whole page... Okay, so this is the page where Rob gets to cut loose a little bit. And it's all a little suspect. Weird decision to show the bones through and everything. I wonder if that was part of the script. It might have been. So Skids is kind of unhurt. I mean, she did sustain a pretty heavy concussive blast, but, I mean, for the most part, that's not a bad result, really, from how bad things could have been. But now she has no way to stop Nitro from charging up again. But since he was contained the last time, it did something to his molecular structure, so he can't reform, and he just kind of disintegrates. So he's turned to dust. The result, I suspect, of exploding within the extremely confined space of the mutant's withholding field. The concussion so shattered his molecular bonds that he was unable to reform. I guess that's an explanation, sure. And meanwhile, we're going to cut to the New Mutants that matter, who are dealing with the shit that matters in Asgard, where they finished what I think was a pretty lengthy adventure defending Asgard from some kind of attacker. I'm not for sure who. Thor isn't there, of course, because he's off dealing with Loki. But the New Mutants showed up and showed their valor and stuff, and essentially won the day. So they've got the Asgardian gods on their side, who are able to share an elixir of life to help them heal. And then they're all like, yay, we're all healed up, yay, now it's time to go home. Oh, you can't go home, because the bridge to Midgard got destroyed. And so now we're kind of stuck in the negative zone. And we're not even really sure how you got here, but maybe we'll figure something out. And at this point, Freedom Force, the government-backed mutant team, full of super mutants who, but I mean, they always present themselves as heroes, come in to pick up Rusty and Skids. Because, I mean, there's been a whole bunch of crazy shit going on. People saw them bust out of jail. They never really did get a chance to clear their name. There are camera people here nearby, and we got to give Rob a little bit of credit for putting people in the background here. I think that's under specific direction, but still, he did it, so that's something. And so while the cameras are here, Rusty tries to tell his side of the story, but is quickly cut off by the Crimson Commando, who is a character I'm not familiar with. Obviously, I know the Blob and Pyro. Rusty tries to get everyone's attention by firing up, but of course Pyro just controls fire, and Blob just knocks him straight out. And then we're kind of back to square one, with Rusty and Skids under arrest from Freedom Force. So, where they tried to go clear their name, now they're too beat up and unconscious to defend themselves when the Crimson Commando here, with his bandana of truth, tells all the reporters that nope, these are evil mutants, and now we've wrangled them up, and we're going to see that they don't hurt humanity ever again. Somewhere else, at an installation of some kind, perhaps, some shadowy figures infiltrate and start taking out guards, and this is the Mutant Liberation Front. I believe this is the first time we're meeting them. I guess this is their first appearance, probably. So we first meet Wildside, Strobe, and Rob Liefeld's greatest creation, Zero. And so they're going to blow up this building here, which is a major federal energy research facility, which seems kind of niche, but sure. And they want Rusty and Skids freed, and every day they remain in captivity, another false symbol of humanity's prosperity and liberty will be destroyed. So the Mutant Liberation Front is a full-on terrorist unit, and I'm sure mostly a Liefeld creation. And next issue, we're going to get the first appearance of a nameless mutant. The New Mutants escape from Asgard, and one man stands against the mutant terrorists. Meet him! Next issue, the New Mutants' lives will never be the same. Well, they got that part right. Alright, so that's going to do it for New Mutants number 86. That is quite the throwaway issue. It's fine in terms of a one-off kind of adventure story, I suppose. I don't know, so little happens in it. Well, I mean, like, plenty of stuff happens, but it all completely resets by the end of the issue. So it really feels unnecessary. But it is interesting to see Liefeld's earliest work. So next time we touch on a New Mutants book, it'll be issue 87. It'll be the first appearance of Cable. And that'll still be inked by Bob Wyacek. So that'll be interesting to check out. But in the meantime, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over to my Patreon and subscribe there. That'll give you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff, the pages and the finished comics, to the YouTube videos before they get released to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusives. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. I never really thought I'd bother to revisit this one, because I always figured, well, why would you start here? Why wouldn't you start with number 87 with the Cable issue? But no, now I can do this one, and now I've done it, and it's like, wow, that was pointless. Still, it is an issue that I've always been a little bit curious about, that I've gotten to check out, so that's something. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.